Hey, folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Secure IT 360, coming at you with a new episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. Today, you have Mr. Spencer Alessi. Let's go, dude. Good to see you, man. And
Hey,
myself, Brad, here. And today is kind of an interesting topic, kind of excited to talk about it. And so the kind of the theme behind this is like, should you tell your MSSP slash, SOC that you're getting a pen test, right? And probably more specifically, should you give them the parameters around it? So we're going to deep dive into that today. And so just out of the gate, man, what's your gut punch feeling about like, hey, should we should we call them and be like, yo, dude, we're getting a pen test next week?
yeah, it's a loaded question, right?
I
There's
know,
a
I
lot of
know.
nuance to it. It's interesting because I've been having this conversation a lot. We have it with clients, right? When we do kickoff calls for external, for internal, a lot of different things. Like, should we tell them? They ask the question.
You might even say it's
My
the most common question we get,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, especially on internals, especially the way we do things. They're like, whoa, 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 you're gonna like peel back the curtain, like do all these
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
You're gonna be in my environment. Should we tell the SOC? Should we tell our MDR provider? So I'll share what I tell clients when we do internal pen tests,
Yeah.
and then I think it would be important to discuss kind of like what the role of a SOC is
Hmm.
and who's the customer, right? Because I think that's a very big distinction. Is that the client is the customer. The client gets to decide the risk of a thing in their environment. The
Yep.
client gets to decide what they action on, what they want to action on, and what they don't. And in my opinion, the SOC is a pipeline for the customer or the client to decide what is going on in their environment and to figure out what bad things are happening potentially in their environment.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, the SOC doesn't get to decide who the threat actor is. The client is the one who decides that this is a threat or it is not a threat. And the client is the customer. They're paying money to get the insights and the notifications from an expert third party into what the heck is going on in my environment, right?
Hmm.
So I have a lot of thoughts and kind of opinions on how that works, but generally for our clients and kind of how we do our internal pen testing, my advice and my recommendation to customers is to not let them know ahead of time up until the point where they detect us. So the reason being is that a lot of SOCs, a lot of MDR providers, they want to do a good job, right? They want to show that they're providing value, rightfully so, and a lot of them are. But what ends up happening that in our experience is that they end up kind of going too far in the direction of trying too hard. And what I mean is that they're kind of hedging a bit. Like they're looking for that activity. They kind of know when it's coming, right? And whether they acknowledge the bias or not, there's bias there. If you know when something's happening, you're naturally biased towards being able to see it and identify it. And when that happens, the MDR provider or the SOC might not send them alerts. They might not send them in the same kind of SLA or reaction time that they normally would if it was a true, like blind test.
Yeah.
And so what we've seen is that there's some hedging going on. There is some places where the client will just, or the SOC or MDR provider will just mark everything a true positive and say, we're not going to alert you at all because it's not a real threat. And then that ends up, in both cases, doesn't provide the client a lot of value.
Hmm.
It doesn't give them the insights that they really need for somebody that is, for all intents and purposes, we're a threat actor. Like we're a real threat in their environment. And
Yes.
we want them to treat it as such so that they have the practice, they have gone through the reps in the experience of what that looks like. So when a real threat actor does come, marching through the door, they've kind of seen it before. They know what some of those indicators look like. They've gotten the emails from the SOC. So it's just some high level thoughts there.
So there were kind of two big things that you said there that I think we should deep dive into. So early on, you said, when they detect us. I think quantifying that is important because, they're gonna get a logon event to the internal machine that you're starting at on Monday morning.
Mhm.
Did they catch us? You know,
Right.
obviously not, right? But they did. They probably got a log. There might even be some kind of low level alerting going on, whatever. Maybe it's a new user account, hasn't been seen before in the environment. But there will become a tipping point where enough alerts have been generated, enough events have been correlated where, hey, there is a legitimate threat actor in your environment. To me, that's the pivotal point. That's the point where we're like, yep, got us. We're doing a pen test. Good job. Right. I wish that point would come more often. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all, which is kind of scary. But the point is there, right? So we kind of need to understand that kind of going into that, because to your point, that is part of the test. And this is what a lot of people do not understand. And this is part of client education for us when we have these kickoff calls and we start getting into these engagement discussions. And that is like, they are part of the test. Part of what we're doing is evaluate, again, fundamentally. And again, I think it's really important to boil this down to like a simple statement. When we do a pen test, we're evaluating controls. Like if you had to summarize an internal assumed breach type pen test, we're evaluating control. A SOC is a control, dude. Right. So we need to evaluate that. In fact, I might even argue it's one of the largest, most expensive, and also potentially successful controls that you can have. Why wouldn't we want to evaluate, the validity of that? And dude, half the time we find massive gaps in their ability to see and the telemetry that they're not getting.
I was just going to mention that the
conversation go for it,
we had yesterday.
Yeah, please do, because I think that might even be what spawned this episode. Was it?
It was partly that. It was partly discussions on X, around like, well, from a SOC analyst perspective, is like, if we're responding to all these pen tests all the time, we're not responding to real threats. And it's like, I kind of agree with that, right? Like you can get fatigue from, mainly a lot of the automated scanners and automated pen testing platforms. If they're just going out there spamming stuff and like mass scanning and getting all these alerts, that's nonsense, right? Absolutely. If you're doing scanning activity, right, let the SOC know, like, hey, we're scanning from this host. It's part of our normal process. Like, yeah, you should let them know. But if it's hands-on keyboard, if it's a threat actor, like quote unquote, like definitely not. And that is a real threat for all intents and purposes.
So I'm gonna have an unpopular opinion here. All right. To me, scanning is within the noise floor.
Yeah.
Okay. You should be able to tell the difference between a threat actor and an automated vulnerability scan. Like if you can't identify Nessus as it is carving through your environment internally or externally, and that doesn't look different to you as a SOC, I'm just going to say SOC, not SOC analyst, because everybody's at a different skill level. I think you might be doing something wrong, dude. You know what I mean?
Or not as well as you could be.
Right. And so, again, any system on the internet today, and we've actually done experiments on this, right? Like within 45 seconds of an IP going live, some clown show in North Korea has already scanned that thing, and it's going to get scanned perpetually for its entire existence until it's decommissioned. Again, I'm talking noise floor, dude. So, if we're talking about, if you have fatigue issues from a security scanning perspective, you need to dial the noise filter up a little bit, right? But you should absolutely be able to tell the difference between you putting yourself in, domain admins, right? And somebody running Nessus, dude. Like we're talking about two totally different ends of the spectrum here. So I think that argument is invalid. I said all of that to summarize. That's an invalid argument to me.
Yeah.
And I will further break that down about why I disagree with that from a SOC perspective. And by the way, I just want to be really clear. I don't work in a SOC. So like I might even get beat up for these opinions from people who are blue team, and that's totally fair. I accept all criticism. But at the same time, we should be able to see past the noise floor. And then also, by the way, if you are seeing so many manual penetration tests that are simulating threat actors across your entire client base, let's say you got 1,000 clients on your SOC, right? That's probably a conservative number for companies like eSentire and Arctic Wolf, but then you're dealing with 1,000 pen tests a year across all of those clients, but you have the work capacity for that.
Yep.
And then once it's been, but it's an exercise for you guys too. Don't
Yep.
dismiss this as like, oh, our client's doing a silly thing and we have to put up with it. Nah, dude, you should be evaluating your own tooling and your own processes. Does
Yep.
that make sense? So like there's enough value to go around. Everybody can get
For
some out of
sure.
this. And so I think if we're looking at this as like, oh, it's, it's
Yep.
adding to the, bro, your perspective is wrong. So, all right, I'm going to get off the
Yeah.
soapbox
And
on
going
that.
back, no, it's all valid points, I think. And absolutely. Going back to the discussion about the controls, right? One thing I'll say, and probably should have said to preface all of this, is you might be contractually obligated to make some concessions, right? When there is activity going on.
Mhm.
A lot of MDR providers, they have stuff in their contracts that indicates towards, notifying them when you're doing testing and things like that. So consult that, scrutinize that, make sure you're good to go on that. And you're not breaking anything like that. That's your own thing you got to worry about. But going back to the controls thing is, we have done pen tests, and just recently this happened because we had a conversation yesterday with a client. We did an internal pen test. Their security tools were lighting up. They had a lot of great security tools. They were getting alerts. The problem was their MDR provider was also ingesting that stuff into a SIM, but their MDR provider never sent them a single alert. Not a single one.
Ooh. Bro, I'm burning something down. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And if I'm that customer of that MDR provider, I'm like, what the heck's going on? Like,
Yeah.
why are we paying all
And
this money?
and to be clear, that MDR provider is one of the ones I would consider to be top tier.
Yeah.
And so, we're not talking about, a Walmart brand sock. Like
Yep.
these guys are expensive. They are generally considered to be good at what they do. And they probably are. But it was kind of surprising to be like, oh wow, you guys didn't alert anything.
Yeah. And the kicker to this is that it wasn't some elaborate like defense evasion or us being super stealthy. It seems to have been come down to a configuration mistake, an implementation mistake, right? It was nothing that the client did wrong. It was how their service was put together and kind of implemented in their environment, how it was configured. There was some moving parts there that made it such that they potentially were not getting the logs that the client thought they were getting, right? Or the MDR provider thought they were capturing. So they weren't able to action any of it, right?
Bro, that's a win though.
Huge win
For the
because
client.
yeah, huge win for the client because they never would have saw that. It would
Right.
have been a breach. They would have had an incident. They would have gone through all of this, heartache, and then realized like, hey, why didn't you detect this MDR provider? And then they would have found it, right? But
Yeah.
we found it early enough before bad things could happen. And it's a configuration thing. We got together with the client, the MDR provider, tried to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
And comes down to a misconfiguration, right? And the point of this discussion is going back to your point about testing controls. That's why we test things.
Yes.
It's why we do these assessments is we don't want to assume that everything is working all the time, right?
Yeah.
We want to do these on a regular basis and make sure that the things that we expect are the things that are actually happening, right? It's the cliche saying, inspect what you expect,
Yep.
right? Test the things. That's why we do audits. That's why we do these assessments to make
Yep.
sure that the things that are in place are working as intended.
Yep. And here, I'm going to take that a step further, right? And this is obviously coming from a position of bias, and I openly admit that. There is not a better way to evaluate the success of these controls than a pen test, right? No amount of vulnerability scanning, no amount of tabletop / audit is gonna tell you if your MDR provider, your SOC, is effectively monitoring and alerting on a threat actor moving through your environment. There is literally no other way to do this, right?
Yep.
There might be some threat emulation software or some crap out there. I have no idea, but this is how you do it. And I would postulate the next question being like, hey, dude, if you've never done an internal pen test, or maybe you haven't done one recently, how do you even know? Right? And how many millions of dollars worth of controls, things like EDR, things like XDR, MDR, SOC, like all of this stuff you are pouring dump trucks of money into, and we don't even know if it's working. This is how you find out.
Yep.
Right? And so in your estimation, across all the internal pen tests that you do, what percentage of the time would you say that someone's MSSP slash SOC met expectations?
Putting them on the spot.
Yeah, sorry. Not sorry. I'm not sorry at all. This is a great question.
I guess it depends on like what the expectations are, right?
Well, so
Because
like when you do the client debrief, right? And you have in your report, we call it like a mini purple team, right? Because you have like, I ran this tool at this time,
yep.
log, alert, event, whatever, and at the end of explaining that to the client, how often do they go, I would have thought they would have caught more?
Yeah. I would say a majority of the time I would expect them to catch more or to see more, detect more. With the caveat that because of the way that we do internal pen testing and because of some of the environments that we're in, particularly when there's not a ton of actual abuses that happen, or they just are pretty well buttoned up, so there's not a lot of true exploitation. There's not a lot of abuses that are possible.
Right.
Because of that, a lot of the activity becomes reconnaissance-based activity, which is notoriously more difficult to identify. So I definitely empathize with that. But man, like if you've got 100 servers and I'm scanning every single one looking for file shares that I can access, in my opinion, that's something that is something that you would want to be able to detect, because that would be abnormal behavior. And there are products that you can use. There's signals in event logs. There's things you can do to detect that activity. Yep. So some of the reconnaissance stuff is a little tricky, but some of it is honestly things that I think organizations should be detecting. So I would say as a whole, like I'm more often recommending that they turn additional things on and look into additional products to increase the level of visibility and monitoring of their environments. But very rarely am I like, they did it at 0%. Like they got an F. Like it's less common, that although it happens. Yeah. So I'd say most often it's like a C kind of thing, like a C or a B grade.
Okay, so that was a super political answer, and I understand why you answered it the way that you did. So I'm going to summarize that by saying the majority of the time, detections and alerts do not meet the expectations of us and the client.
That's fair.
Right. And so ours are a little bit different, I would say, than the client, because in a lot of cases, they don't have the technical expertise that we do, but they usually have some level of right or wrong, expectation that they have applied to the service that they have procured with the MSSP. And most of the time, at least in the debriefs that I have been on, right? Because I'm not on every one of the internal debriefs, the client has generally been like, yeah, we could probably do better than that. Or that's not what I thought. I would have thought we would have seen that, or blah, blah, blah. So when we start deviating from those expectations, that is where, in my opinion, the value of the test really shines, even in a scenario where, as you described, there's not a lot of exploitation, they're buttoned up, really good environment, et cetera.
Yep.
And so
I got a good one too.
Yeah.
We were talking yesterday with that client and their MDR provider, and they're like, yeah, we only alert on critical and high events. It's like, okay, so if it's a low, but it says it's Mimikatz, like, is that not an alert?
Like, yeah, but that happens all the freaking time though, right? Where we'll get an alert that's like Priv-esque and it's a low, right? Yep. Or we'll see the client will send us an alert and it's like, bro, I just dumped LSAS. Like, what do you mean low? And so, but yeah, that's a horrifying thing for them to say.
Exactly. And it begs the question, going back to expectations, right? Of like what we expect them to alert versus what not. The client might have, signed a deal with an MDR provider, and it might be 3 years down the road and they don't even remember what they were getting.
Yep.
Then we do the pen test. They don't see a lot. And then they talk to the MDR provider and they're like, oh yeah, we're only sending you critical and high events. It's like, I didn't remember that. I didn't know. And like, shame on the client for, that a little bit, but also like, that's something that the MDR provider should be, reminding them, or like, at least like in the regular cadence and communication with them, like, hey, do we need to turn anything else on? Like, is there anything else you're concerned about that you want us to detect or monitor? Or like, this should come up in discussion with the customer.
It feels we see a lot
of times it's just like, we're just going to send you a few things, not everything.
It feels a lot like a marriage counselor, You know, it's like, okay, so you said this. How does that make you feel? We're like, I don't like that because it's not giving me the visibility I want in my environment. And they're like, okay, so can you fix that? You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so like we're sitting in this room and it's funny because we're the adversarial component, but the reality is, man, we want everybody to be successful.
Yep.
You know, and so if we can help that MSSP slash SOC, MDR provider, whatever, you know, by convincing the client that they need to go turn on some level of logging and alerting that they don't currently have, because that's a problem a lot of times.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people who buy these services, they think that it is flip it on and walk away.
Yep.
And it's absolutely not, dude. Just like any other large impact security tooling, care and feeding is going to directly contribute to the level of success that you have with that.
Yep.
And so I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. But we've deviated so far from like the purpose of, of this to kind of deep dive on it. And that's great though. I think these are all really good conversations, but should we tell them? And you mentioned something that was interesting to me about the contract. And we got to be careful how we talk about contractual obligations. But I want to tell you this. You can negotiate that out of your contract. So when you sign with someone and you see that and you review that contract, take it out. Contracts are until they are signed, they are negotiable. And so organizations need to understand that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is read the very fine detail of it, because if they say you have to notify us of offensive I don't know, whatever, pen testing type engagements, be like, cool, man, we're going to have a pen test in Q4 2025.
Hmm.
You've been notified. And so that way you're fulfilling your obligation based on contractual
Yep.
language. They're going to be, the SOC's probably going to be a little sad about that, because they're like, yeah, but when? And you're going to be like, here's contract, bro. It's Q4. That's when. And so,
Yep.
but that I think that's that kind of stuff's important, because
Yeah.
to your point, if you tell them it's coming, dude, it's not a good test anymore.
Exactly. And that's what we encourage clients to do. If they're really concerned about it, they want to kind of meet them in the middle, say, hey, give them a time frame, tell them approximately when, and then when they ask, when they detect our activity, then you can give them more information, more parameters, so that they're kind of prepared for it. But the thing that we always encourage is that whether you tell the SOC or not that you're doing a pen test, the most important thing is the data. It's the telemetry, it's the alerts, it's the information that the SOC is going to see or not see. That is the product. That is the result and the outcome that we are helping the client drive towards. It's like, did we see it or did we not?
Yep.
And whether they are notified ahead of time or not, my advice to clients is make sure that you ask them and tell them, like, this is the information we expect to get from you during this process. We want you to send alerts just like you normally would. We want you to take action just like you normally would. We want you to do all of the same things you normally would and give us all of the same alerts. We don't want you to hold back just because we're doing a test, right? We want to know what you're seeing and how you're seeing it, when you're seeing it, how you respond, how quickly, etc. For all the reasons we mentioned previously.
Absolutely. And if there were some way to ensure that you could get that level of validation and testing after notifying them, then we would just be like, yeah, dude, cool, whatever. But our experience has shown you don't get the same level of treatment once once they're working a pen test engagement, because it's not a real thing anymore. It's not, it's not priority for them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels. It's kind of like tangentially, I was watching this sniper competition on YouTube. It like came up on my algorithm, right? On YouTube. And I'm like, oh, that looks cool. Yeah. And I started watching it. And it's like this stealth thing. And like, the targets are camouflaged and like, you got to find them. And like, it was actually quite interesting. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But there's a lot of parallels to that, right? Yeah. If in this competition, they were told ahead of time where the targets are, and what they look like,
and they're all painted orange. Yeah, like, right? What are we doing?
What's the point? Like, now the competition is like, can I just hit the target, right? And then it's like a different bag altogether. Yeah. So whether it's a pen tester or a real threat actor, the core point is like the bias that is inherently there when that party is notified.
Agreed. So quick side note, admin. this time of year is super challenging for everybody in the offensive security world, whether you're trying to get a penetration test or, whether you're performing pen testing, right? And so we've done this cycle for forever, where it's like end of the year gets really busy. Everybody's got to get their annual compliance-based, whatever external penetration test in, so that it occurs during that calendar year. And so, in order to kind of meet that demand, we here at the Offensive Security Group within Secure IT 360 have created a pen testing as a service platform. And the purpose of this platform is to reduce the time and the cost for kind of getting that external penetration test done. And we've basically taken our external process and put that into this platform. And so this is not like an AI automated pen test. This is literally the same tooling and things that we would use on a manual pen test, but it's kind of built into this pen test as a service platform. And so if that is something that you guys have a need for, right, you need to get that external pen test in 2025. Today, as of recording, it is December 12th. So like your time frame's slipping away, dude.
December
So
4th.
yeah. Wait, what did I say?
You said December 12th.
Did I read it backwards, dude? I was looking at okay.
Today's the 4th as we're recording it.
12th month, 4th day.
When this releases, it'll be the 5th of December.
Bro, it's been a long week, but thank you for catching that. But yeah, so my point is this, right? If you guys still need to get that external pen test, that checkbox done by the end of the year, reach out to us, let us know, and we can get you guys squared away. And so there'll be a link in the description of this episode if you want to learn more information about that or reach out to us on that subject. All right, so kind of putting a pin on this thing a little bit, right? So our position, I think, is we shouldn't tell them. We still have to meet our contractual obligations. So like you said, that's up to you guys to figure out. But the less information you give them leading up to the actual execution of the pen test, the more value you're going to get out of it. And that is the most important thing of all, is we want you guys, again, you pointed this out, and I think that's really important. The client is who we're focused on. Right. That's the person that we want to get the most value to. Now, we will work with you guys. And you mentioned being on the phone with the client and their third-party SOC and helping the two of them, doing that marriage counseling thing, right? Helping the two of them get into a better place in their relationship. And we're happy to do that, right? That's part of the service that we offer, especially when we do internal penetration testing, because it's the most relevant for this. Then, dude, bring them to the table on the report debrief. Let them speak to what detection capabilities that they have, why they miss things. And so, this kind of goes into, I think, what's part of a larger view of what a pen test should be. This is not a short technical engagement that delivers a PDF. We are stepping into a very intimate relationship with the client and all parties that are involved in the successful execution of their defensive systems in their environment. And so, that's one of the reasons that we do this, multi-month retesting and remediation process with multiple meetings across several emails and renditions of the report. And so it is a process, and we want to be there to support these guys throughout that. And the SOC is just kind of one vertical within that entire, platform, I guess.
Yeah, I used the same word earlier when I was talking to somebody about internal pen testing specifically, and it is very intimate, right? We're kind of peeling back the curtains. We're looking behind the scenes. We're kind of getting in the nitty gritty and looking at the skeletons and all the stuff that has maybe been neglected or the team hasn't gotten support for. So we're very much in an intimate scenario where we're finding things that maybe people are even embarrassed about, us discovering in many ways, right? Because they haven't had the time or the resources or the motivation to fix or to address, right? And because of that, we treat the engagement like that, right? It's not just like a one and done, spray some stuff around and like, see you later. It's meeting with their vendors. It's getting to a point where the vendor is acknowledging they made a mistake, or they're fixing a configuration issue, or we're helping them through those hurdles because we've gone through them before with other clients in previous roles. We're really kind of guiding them and walking hand in hand with them through this process. And it's less so a technical exercise and more so like a security, like I don't want to say assessment, but it's it's not so much that it's like this technical assessment thing, to your point just a few minutes ago. It's like this thing that helps them go from point A to point B. Like it's an outcome. We're looking for an outcome. That outcome is like making your environment harder to attack.
Yeah.
Right. So didn't describe it very well. But
Yeah,
that's how I see it,
it's tough because the words like exercise and assessment have such a different connotation to them that there's not really a great word to describe what we're trying to talk about here. But what this ends up being is a large scale exercise in improving the security posture of your technology stack and identifying gaps that may be present in that stack. And so again, I think a lot of people, and we're gonna work really hard to break this away from the industry. We're not here to identify vulnerabilities. Are we going to do some of that? Absolutely, yes, because that's just part of the nature of the job. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to find, RCE on an old Apache Tomcat server in your environment, right? The goal is to give you things that you can do to markedly improve the posture of your environment, markedly improve protections, detections, alerting, and capabilities. And so it just goes so far beyond just doing, some vulnerability scanning and pen testing in an environment. And that's kind of the myth that we're trying to destroy, I think, in having these conversations.
Yeah, I think if I can use this word, if people don't beat me up too much for it, I do see it as being transformational for a lot of our clients, right? A lot of our clients walk out of these engagements with a new perspective of how to defend their organization.
Yeah.
It is things that they didn't know they should turn on, like fine-grained password policies. We've had customers be like, I didn't know that existed. Yeah. Transformation, right? They have transformed how they look at defending their organization through doing these assessments. So I think it's fair to say they're like a transformational type thing, where we're catering to their needs during the assessment and after to help them through this process to come out, much better on the other end.
100% agree with that. In fact, I think that is the best way possible to wrap this thing up. So, folks, if you got any value from this whatsoever, I encourage you to share this with your peers. Go find Spencer on X. He posts all the time, really good content. And so I encourage you to check him out. Check us out over at offsec.blog. Everything that we do, it gets posted over there, including podcasts and white papers and tooling. And probably we need to add some links to some of our other resources there as well, so people can find it very easily. But yeah, that's kind of the hub where we put everything, is over at offsec.blog. And so, yeah, that's all we have time for today. We'll see you guys next week.